What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of T-Dub's Film Room, brought to you by thebarnauburn.com. We're back for another commit breakdown video. This time, an underrated tight end, hybrid tight end prospect that has some wheels. Let's get right to it. All right, quick look at the prospect profile here. Look, he's like I said, underrated. He's really not rated at all. We'll look at his film in just a second. I expect him at least to get some type of rating throughout the year, but really came down to Auburn, Virginia Tech. 6'4", 210 listed. Again, kind of hybrid tight end athlete. But let's look at the film. Let's see what we got. All right, first play we want to take a look at. So this is from his spring game. All right, you see him lined up out wide. Again, good size. All right, good length. Definitely a guy that we're going to anticipate hit the weight room and gain some mass and some strength. But there's no denying the just initial pop off the film, right? And look, we're going to get an ad here, but we'll go back and watch this again. But he's got some juice, if he does end up projecting as a tight end, all right, and not just a big receiver. Shoot, if you're able to get 20, 30 pounds on him, if you're able to, get him blocking on the perimeter and stuff like that, and he's able to maintain some of this, you don't have a lot of tight ends that have that. Obviously, look, this is the high school level, but this is pretty good competition. I think 4A or so, Atlanta area out of Georgia. So decent enough competition that when you're pulling away like that, it's not nothing. So this is the first play. Let's jump to his full year junior highlights and take a look at that. All right, so at this point, we're about halfway through like his end of junior year tape here, or highlight film. And this is actually, there's a couple of things here really. One is you can see he's put on some weight. He looks a lot skinnier here, but he's put on some weight even like into the spring. But that play right there, okay, a little switch release, popping open over the middle. But the contested catchability, catching it away from his body, breaking a tackle, pulling away, really starting to pull away from a much smaller, probably faster kid. And then we have a couple more plays here. This one, my gosh, moon ball. Just being able to track it and get your hands on it and follow through with the catch like that, those are skills there that not everybody has, especially a potentially a tight end. Again, away from the body catch, kind of in traffic. All right, showing good strength after the catch, tough to bring down. A couple of these plays here. This is another one away from his body. All right, on the sideline, being able to catch it. This is an interception, and we'll go back to the start of his highlight tape here. But he plays a lot of defense, and some of the most impressive highlights that he has are from defense. But first play of his highlight tape here. All right, takes the pop pass, change of direction, and just vision and feel and being an athlete, working all the way across the field. And then there his strides go. You can kind of see that once he starts getting stretched out. But even there, of course, you're kind of getting tired at the end of that run. But, some of these, I really think maybe the most, and there's another, away from the body catch, breaking away. I think, if I'm the Auburn coaching staff looking at this, I'm going, all right, the junior film has got some like really intriguing parts of it, right? So this is the part we're watching right here. But even though it's just one play from his spring game, he's clearly developed quite a bit physically just since the end of his junior year and since spring ball. I think that's ultimately where the gamble comes from. Of course, they've missed on some other guys. There's no doubt about it. We'll talk about that in a second too. But look, I don't see why you wouldn't take this kid at this point, with the class, missing on some other guys. And then look, the only worry that I have with, with this kid as a prospect really, and here's a pick six. Okay, you just don't see that a lot. 6'4" potential tight end prospect, breaking, in zone coverage for a pick six, running away from people. The only problem really I see with him is you get these guys who, even if you just talk about like a big receiver, right? If you talk about like a Cedarian Morgan, somebody I've done a breakdown before, big receivers, they typically lack in separation. So that's kind of their longer striders to kind of get a second to get going. So if you get a smaller guy jamming them, typically it's harder for them to separate. That's going to be the case for like a big receiver. Obviously for this guy, his toughest part that he's going to have to develop is probably physicality and blocking in the run game and on perimeter screens and stuff like that. So it's like, all right, you take who he is now and you think, all right, is he going to be like an actual inline Y tight end? Well, I mean, probably not. Is he going to be like a Gronk? Probably not. Okay, so how do we use him? Well, we use him on the perimeter, maybe even some like Y ISO stuff, backside, where if they're going to put like a linebacker or safety on him, we're looking for a mismatch. But we'll do a lot of like, kind of slot positioning, maybe even H-back type work, kind of similar to Rivaldo Fairweather, where we would have him blocking in perimeter screens, and and hope to get him in space with the ball in his hands, and then down the seam and stuff like that, making contested catches over the middle. I think that's kind of the best that you're going to get, I think, with a guy like this. He doesn't have the biggest frame in terms of height, but also just, I don't see him being able to add more than 20, 30 pounds. So you're looking at 230, 240 pounds potentially. So, he's not like a Kaden Prothrow who's 6'6" and, 220 or so right now and can clearly get up to like 250, who could be an absolute mismatch to a lot of people. I just think, this kid, and we'll talk about comps in a second, I think he's really interesting from the fact that if you can get him to be an actual tight end, then he should have like very upper end athleticism for that position. But the worry is that he kind of falls into this, limbo of not quite big and physical enough to be an every down tight end and help you in the run game and in blocking, but not quite, fast and skilled enough to be a receiver, right? So if you fall into that category, and there's, that's showing pretty good physicality there. If you fall in that category, it's going to be hard to, really become like a true impact player at the SEC level. It just is what it is. But we'll look at comps again. I mean, look, he's an athlete. There's no doubt about it. I don't mind the pickup at all, especially in this class. You're probably going to have a 2 tight end class. So, why not pull him in and then try to go for some other guys, different body type. But let's look at a couple of things real quick. What I'm going to do is we're going to compare him to a couple of the targets that so far Auburn's missed out on and see who we like better. And then we'll look at a comp and then we'll be done. All right. So there's 3 guys that Auburn has kind of been recruiting in addition to Kentrell White at the tight end position. All right. One of them is Kaden Prothrow. I don't think he's committed yet. Pretty sure everybody just assumes that he's going to go to Georgia. But you can see, I mean, this is a 5-star guy. He's 6'6", whatever he's listed at, 220, 230. He is what he's ranked for a reason. All right, you can see the difference in size here. He's incredibly long. He does show like good physicality just in terms of, run after catch, but also blocking. The thing really that shows up on his highlight tape that I like the most, though, is his, attacking the ball at the highest point, making difficult contested catches. Like, obviously, some of these are him just pulling away from people and just being a better athlete. But I think here's a good example. This is what you want to see, all right? I mean, that's perfect. Like, from a guy with the body type and the skill set that he has, you want to see him just go up. Even if he's covered, it doesn't matter. Go up and make the play. But again, just a couple of, here's another good contested catch. Just wanted to put this on tape, after watching Kentrell White as a little bit of a juxtaposition. But let's take a look at a couple more as well. All right, here's another one, J.C. Anderson. He recently committed to Ole Miss. I really like J.C. Anderson. I mean, he's a guy that obviously, again, if, multiple Power 4 and SEC schools are recruiting you, you've showed, elite for the position, athleticism. I mean, that skill set there. Now, look, I do think his competition is a little bit different, just compared to some of the, like, especially like Kaden Prothrow for sure, but probably Kentrell White as well. But obviously, bullying these smaller, less athletic players that he's playing against, this is what shows up if you watch all of his highlight tape, where I think he is a really good blend of physical blocking and also having a little bit of like playmaking ability as well, just in terms of how he projects to the SEC. You're not finding a Rob Gronkowski. You're not finding a Travis Kelce typically. You're just looking for people to be, serviceable. And yes, if they have a mismatch, they can take advantage of it. If they end up with the ball in their hands, can they at least make one play, to get a couple of extra yards and get a first down, get a touchdown, whatever? And can they be consistent, reliable blockers? That's what you're looking for from this position. If you run into a unicorn like an O.J. Howard, like I think maybe like a Kaden Prothrow could end up being, then that's great. But for the most part, you just want a serviceable athlete that can help you block and then, make a play every now and then. JC Anderson to me is like a really good blend of that. So, sucks we lost in Ole Miss. I'm sure we'll continue to recruit him. Let's look at one more guy real quick. All right, the last peer of Kentrell White we'll look at just for comparison is a guy named Xavier Tiller. Right now, again, another 4-star kid out of Georgia, committed to Florida State. Nice little one-handed catch there. All right, showing a little bit of playmaking ability, get down the sideline. Now, you'll have to bear with me here. His are all chopped up into multiple videos. So we'll go back and go to newest. And then I think the other one that I looked at was maybe Lovejoy. Okay, so the reason I like this one is because it demonstrates his ability as a blocker. So here he is kind of at the point, top of the stack here. They're going to pop a little screen out here, I believe. Yep. And then here he is working his guy. That just shows good, want to really from a Xavier Tiller. So again, not a ton to look at. Maybe we can look at one more real quick here. All right. Again, just as a comparison, let's look at Noonan. I believe this is something relevant. Let's take a look. It's probably down here in the, yep. So they're going to pop a little screen out to him. So again, sporty athlete. I do think there's a clear difference with Kentrell White in terms of just like his explosive athleticism, especially after the catch. But, I think if I was to rank these guys, I would say, Kaden Prothrow, obviously, then I'd have JC Anderson, then I'd have Kentrell White, then I'd have Xavier Tiller. So that's just kind of like what I'm looking at. Feel free to offer your opinion, but we'll look at, here's one more, just running the hitch in the boundary. So, I think he's pretty decent. I think they're somewhat comparable, him and Kentrell White. But let's get to a comp, and then, we'll see what you think. All right. You might like this. You might hate this. The guy that just kept coming up for me was a guy that, I watched his high school highlights pretty extensively coming out of high school out of Texas. Landon King. Okay, so that name probably rings a bell. Right now, Landon King is listed as a 6'5", 235, great catch there, 235-pound receiver transferring from Utah to Duke, okay? He's only got like 15 or 20 catches in his career. That's 2 years at Auburn, 2 years at Utah, I believe, and then he's going to have his last year here at Duke. But when you watch this highlight tape, this is Texas football, okay? And they either went to the state championship game or won the state championship game. I can't really remember. But you watch this highlight tape, and, you can't not be impressed. He's making acrobatic catches. He's doing things with the ball in his hands. There's a couple of, looks him here as a blocker that at least he's trying. So, look, we always talk about, there's one right there, that we always talk about certain positions as developmental positions, right? And the number one developmental position I think we all agree is offensive line. Well, a tight end is basically just, he's basically just an extension of the offensive line and a guy who you hope can help you blocking and then can help, in the receiving game. So the tight end position is a developmental position as well. And Landon King had a lot of, if you think about in his short time at Auburn, I think he only had maybe 5 catches, in his 2 years at Auburn. 2 of them were incredible. The catch Penn State one-handed, and then I think a one-handed catch in the Iron Bowl with like the overtime sequence, something like that, in the back of the end zone from TJ Finley. So he had some skill to him, 100%. And again, I think Landon King is a good example of what I was saying earlier, where, man, you could really, it'd be really easy and probably most common for a guy like Kentrell White to be stuck in an in-between. Am I a receiver? Am I a tight end? Am I big enough and physical enough to be a tight end every play? But if I'm going to be a receiver, am I like fast enough and skilled enough? So that's the only really downside or concern. But again, overall, I like the pickup. It's going to be really interesting to see what he does and what he puts on tape this senior year. And, if the rankings kind of catch up to who he projects to be potentially as an athlete. And again, I think a big part of that, I mentioned it, is the development that we've seen from the end of his junior year and his junior year tape and what he showed in his one catch in the spring game. So I like it. I know where we're at. I get it with recruiting. It kind of stinks, but overall, a good athlete that, we'll see how he projects, but you're working with a really good ball of clay at this point. So as always, guys, thank you guys for watching. I think we're going to have some more good news here pretty soon. And obviously, I'll be back on for that. But keep it tuned here and keep it tuned to thebarn.com. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.